Hiemstra, Futurist.com. We're talking to writer, social critic, James Howard Kunstler, author most recently of World Made by Hand, a novel about the end of the oil era. Prior to that, a number of books, including best known perhaps The Long Emergency, also kind of about the end of the oil era and what it would mean to society. So, Jim.
Glenn.
Saturday, I'm in a seminar sponsored by an organization that tries to look at the 1,000-year future.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know. And a guy stands up, and he does, University of Washington scientist, stands up and does a really nice presentation on the end of the oil era, and he's the author of Global Fever or something like that, and global warming, and the nexus of those two things. First response is from a participant in the seminar who's an ex-Republican candidate for governor in the state of Washington and a radio talk show host. And he says, of course, everybody here knows that it's a complete myth that we're running out of oil. He said, this is a known, scientifically accepted fact, and only those who are crazy don't accept that as a scientific fact.
Well, he obviously gets his news from The Onion.
Yeah.
You know, he believes that the Earth has a creamy nougat center.
Yes.
I don't happen to see it that way.
Give us some, you know, people hear about peak oil. It is, in fact, sort of generally accepted now, but give us, in your, 10-sentence kind of summary, where are we now, do you think?
Well, we're seeing evidence that demand is exceeding supply. We're seeing evidence that the Saudi Arabians cannot get more out of the ground every day than they've gotten in the past. The Russians have announced just as of last week that their oil production has peaked, and the Russian authorities themselves announced it. It's not like somebody went behind their back. We know that virtually all the great producers are past peak. But, you know, it's not about running out of oil. It's about what happens to the complex systems that our daily lives depend on as you go over the slippery slope of peak and into depletion, permanent depletion. And what we discover is that these complex systems, like how we produce our food, how we do trade and commerce, how we do finance and capital deployment, how we occupy the terrain, how we move around the terrain. You know, all of these complex systems tend to destabilize and are destabilizing, and we're seeing it actually happen. And the instability that we see in one system, like the transportation system, is ramifying the instabilities in other systems like food production or the suburban living arrangement. The problems in finance are affecting food production, all kinds of capital dependent activities, including the oil industry. Problems in the transport sector are affecting the way people live in suburbia. It's affecting the way the big box stores and chain stores will operate because they're deeply dependent on just-in-time deliveries of merchandise that is circulating around the interstate highway system on the warehouse on wheels. So these systems are all interconnected and interdependent, and they will all enter their own phases of failure as this system, as this set of problems moves forward.
So when the independent truckers a couple of weeks ago, in response to $4 diesel, said we're going to stop driving for a day, with some mixed success, what did you think as you watched that?
What I thought was, obviously these guys cannot keep on delivering loads that cost them $1,500 and get paid $1,200 for doing it. You know, they're not in a charity delivery business, and what you're seeing is our way of moving stuff around North America is failing. You know, we're going to have to move more stuff on rail and on boats, and we're not prepared for any of these things. You know, I had an example of it just this week. I've been flying a lot to do book promotion, and 4 small airlines have gone out of business just in the last 10 days. I was in Minneapolis when Delta and Northwest announced their merger, and Northwest is has its headquarters in Minneapolis, and they serve a lot of the small cities in that part of the country. And so there was this great fear all over that part of the country that the cities like Duluth and Grand Forks and Wausau, Wisconsin, were going to have their service drastically cut down once Delta took over. Instead of once a day flights or twice a day flights, they'd only have once a week. Well, you know what? We are completely unprepared to shift this action to the railroads because we've neglected the whole railroad scene. And we desperately need to rebuild the railroads. We're not doing anything. So, the airline industry, in short, is visibly crashing. And as that occurs, by the way, it will affect plenty of other systems. It's going to affect the tourist industry, which will cease to be a major industry, as we've known it in many parts of the country. This is really serious.
Give us, I know it's really dangerous to put timelines on these things, but what is your sense of time frames going forward as to, will we see a partial recovery of these systems and, the so-called long plateau of supplies that sort of keeps us limping along for a long time, or do you think that as soon as a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we'll be really in deep shit in terms of some of these systems?
Yeah, I think that within about 18 to 36 months, we're going to have very serious problems, especially with the oil, and we can see this. There have been a couple of new subplots to the oil story since I published the Long Emergency in 2005. One is, we've discovered that the oil export rates, that the exporting nations, that their exports are going down more steeply even than their depletion rates, for the simple reason that they're using more of their own oil. They're buying more cars. Their populations are still growing. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, Russia, the biggest oil producers in the world. They're sending out less oil. Also, we're seeing oil nationalism start to really change the scene and change the landscape of the oil markets, because more countries are withholding oil from the futures markets where it's auctioned off, and they're creating favored customer relations with other countries that they want to do business with. And we're going to tend to be less favored among some of the oil-producing nations. So we've got a problem there. What we're probably going to see, the next thing on the agenda for us, and I think in the next 18 to 36 months, will be spot and regional shortages of oil and gasoline. Right now we're in a funny situation because just in the last 90 days we've seen the price of oil go up maybe 10% or more. It's today as we speak, it's about 117, I think, a barrel. 2 weeks ago it was 105. So this has been pretty severe, but people assume that it's all about price shocks. No, it's going to be about something else soon. There will be a new wrinkle called shortages, called gasoline lines, rationing, because that will happen. Hoarding behavior, which is going to really create a sort of toxic social kind of element to this. So
we had a case here locally. A guy was arrested a couple weeks ago who had gotten codes to gasoline pumps and was going around with barrels in the back of his pickup at night and had, I think the number was, had stolen as much as 60,000 barrels of gasoline. I mean, really 6,000 gallons of gasoline.
Oh, 6,000.
And sold them to friends at half price over time. And
a cheeky fellow.
Yes. I thought, well, that's the beginning of somebody trying to subvert.
Well, we both know that people are very resilient and resourceful, and they'll do all kinds of things.